Oh, get me. Hey everyone. Hi guys, Lynn Marie again. Here just trying to make sure that this
She's getting her shit
I'm
together.
get yeah, the tripod and I are not having the best day. All right, I think we're on. And I'm gonna just, oh my gosh, it's just still not like sitting up straight.
It's okay. It's perfect. We like to be crooked.
You guys are a patient soul. Sheree is an amazingly patient soul here. The reason that it is not sitting up straight is because the thing that lets me give you good audio is pulling it downward. So it's like you can either see us or you can hear us, and somehow both is not an option at this point. All right, kids, you know what? We're just going to be a little bit crooked today.
I love crooked.
Yay for crooked. I'm like, how do I?
Outside of the line.
Yeah. That's okay. I mean, this is most important that we get the audio for what happens. It's just that I figured, well, Sheree is here and she's game and she's awesome. So let's just do this as a live and bring you a this episode.
What up?
What up? Thank you so much for joining us, Sheree.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I love this kind of like cuddled up chat. We're all just getting cozy here.
Yeah.
Sheree and I met at the book signing for Drew Canoli's UBU.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember who connected us, but you had an incredible story and I was really stoked to share it. And since we became Facebook friends and I've seen you traveling all over, you know, you were in London and then you're back here and you live in Cardiff, you said, right? I've just been like, I cannot wait to have this chat with you.
Aww.
Because I just thought, you can just tell when somebody is going to have an amazing story and just be your new soul sister best friend.
I love
right?
it. Yes. So good.
So I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Let's get started with your story. Take us back to when you are in your late teens, because the thing that Sheree is going to talk about, as I'm now talking at the camera, is something we haven't yet discussed on the show, but women especially, please tune in, listen to this. This is going to be a very important episode for many women. I think it will touch a lot of you. So I am very grateful that Sheree is sharing this story, and I would like you to take us back to where it begins.
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that I've seen in my journey is the power of voice and how often we silence ourselves, right? And for whatever reason, it could be something in childhood, it could be something, you know, a boss tells us that we shouldn't be speaking up, whatever. For me, it was actually, I was 19 and I had gone on a second date with somebody who I knew in my gut I shouldn't be going out with. You just have those feelings where you're like, no. But for whatever reason, I went anyways. And I think that that's like the rebel in me was like, do it anyways, whatever. So second date, we were going to a movie actually, and he was 8 years older than me. I was 19. And we ended up going to his house first because he said he wanted to get me a jacket so I didn't get cold. And I thought, well, that's sweet. All right. So we get to his house, we're in the living room, and he walks back to his bedroom and he says, can you come back here and pick out a jacket? And I said, no, it's fine. Just go and pick one out. I don't really care. So he says, no, I really want you to come back here and just pick one out. Make sure you get the one that you want. And I thought it was weird, right? Like, I don't care. Just give me a jacket.
It's going to be a men's jacket anyway.
Yeah, like it's going to be large.
Yeah.
I'm not a large human.
Yeah.
By the way, can I swear on this show?
Okay.
Okay, great. It just comes out sometimes.
It's totally fine. So, everybody on the show so far. Okay, fine.
Okay, great. So I go back to his room and he grabs me. And what starts as him giving me a kiss, which was very forward for me at that point, I kind of pushed away and he did not let back. And he picked me up and he was a good 100 pounds heavier than me. He threw me on his bed and I said, no, I don't want this. And he's like, trust me, baby, you'll like it. So he pulls down my pants and he proceeds to rape me. And what I remember, of course, it's one of those things that you block out, right? There's a lot of it that I'm like, I probably don't remember certain things, but what I do remember is the scent of his cologne. What I remember is how he breathed on my neck. What I remember is my nails in the back of his back and crying, sobbing, begging him, please stop, please stop. And at one point, my body took over, which thank you, right? Like so grateful to be able to have a body that keeps us safe, and went into protection mode and I blacked out. And when I came to, he stood up, pulled up his pants and he said, see baby, I told you like it. And he walked out the room. And I laid there thinking, this did not just happen to me. Like there's no way this just happened to me. I'm not that girl, right? Like I'm strong, independent, I got my shit together. And it took everything in me to pull myself together. I crawled into the bathroom and I sat on the floor and sobbed. When I stood up, I looked in the mirror and I had mascara running down my face, and I was like, this doesn't get to happen to anybody else. And I walked out of his house. I didn't say a word. I went and sat in my car, the VW Jetta, you know, because that's what everyone's driving at that time.
Yes, it was.
And I cried and I screamed. And I'm not a religious person, but I am spiritual. And I was praying and I said, I'm not leaving this parking spot until I forgive him. And I don't know how long I sat there, but I can honestly say I left and I had forgiven him.
Wow.
Yeah, it was one of those moments that you remember people telling you, if you were fortunate enough to have people telling you these things, that it's not about them or it's not about you, right? It's about them.
Yeah.
Hurt people.
Yes.
And forgiving him was the easy part, but it would be forgiving myself that was more of a challenge, because I stayed silent for 4 years and I didn't tell a soul. So for me, that experience, and then 3 weeks later finding out that I was pregnant from it, was just, it was devastating. And at the same time, the biggest blessing of my life to this day, and I've said this for years, I would not have changed a thing about it. It taught me so much about myself. It taught me so much about resilience and compassion and forgiveness and truly standing in our power and living the purpose that we're here to live, whatever that looks like. And it's going to be different for everybody. And, you know, at that time I was in school for TV I wanted to be a stylist for TV and film. And I thought, there's no way that this happened and I'm not supposed to do something with it. So it completely changed the trajectory for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
So in that 4 years, when you were still staying silent, what kind of things were going on internally?
I'd always been a very outgoing, charismatic person, and people had always looked at me as, she has her shit together. And inside, I literally felt like I was dying. I was holding onto a secret, and I have this saying that our secrets keep us sick, and all of these secrets started manifesting in physical form. And I started getting really sick to the point where for the next 9 years I'd be misdiagnosed and hospitalized for weeks at a time. A multitude of different diagnoses, none of which were accurate, and which led me to actually go back to school for holistic health because I wanted to teach myself how to heal my body. And 9 years later, found out that I had multiple autoimmune diseases, lupus and Hashimoto's, and now hypothyroid. And I didn't want to take medication. But I knew that the only reason that those were manifesting was because I was holding on to something that wasn't allowing the space to open up to heal. So I had to, for my own sanity, for my health, for humanity, really, I believe, I had to speak out about it. And the first time that I did, 4 years later, was to a man that was our second date, very different than the second date. And we ended up being together for 11 years, and he's still a dear friend. And once I said, you know, this is my truth, I couldn't stop talking about it. I know that it's why I'm here. I know that happened so I could spread the message of the importance of voice and how important it is that you may feel like you don't have a lot to say, or what you have to say is not important, right? At the end of the day, we all have a story. We are not our story, but we are what we do with it. And it's up to us to empower ourselves to stand in that truth and be able to come forward in that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so powerful. What did it feel like when you finally started getting it out?
I felt the weight of the world just fall off my shoulders. It was so freeing and powerful. And my mom is one of my best friends. I didn't tell her until just a couple of years ago. And telling her, I think, was like my last puzzle piece. It was the place where I felt like, okay, now I'm in my truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because you're a great illustration of how often these things that we need to quit manifest themselves in the body.
Yeah.
I was on an interview, I was being interviewed this morning, and he was asking like, what kind of things can manifest as what kind of quits, manifest in your health? I'm like, most of them, because that's exactly, I mean, it's physical health or mental health, and by the way, you ignore your mental health long enough, it's going to lead to physical problems. That's
every time.
Yeah, that's just what happens.
Yeah.
So at that point, when you started talking about it, did you have any fears about essentially quitting your own silence?
I wouldn't say yes and no. So the fear was never around how will other people perceive me. I think that was just my upbringing, was you just don't care if you're doing it from the right place, right? But it was more a fear of how will this change me and how I show up in the world? And will I still be able to be the quote unquote strong, independent woman and have this truth? And it was a battle, and it's the biggest reason I didn't say anything in the beginning, was because I didn't want to be seen differently. It wasn't about, people labeling me. I don't care. But I also didn't want anybody to think I was weak. And I thought that this experience had created something that had weakened my spirit, when in fact it strengthened it more than I could possibly articulate.
Yeah, so you were having more of an identity quit issue, or like fear that if I do this, will I be leaving behind the identity of a strong, independent woman?
Yeah.
And did you just say, I'm gonna have to try it anyway because this is my truth?
Yeah, I surrendered, because I really believe that if we're not living in our truth, we're not living. And there's a place for all of us to shine and speak up and say what we need to say to be able to feel more aligned with ourselves. And when we don't do that, that's when, like you say, right, things manifest in the body. And the second that we begin to truly align fully in all capacities of our life, I think that's when we really start to settle into feeling comfortable in our skin, and to feeling confident in our skin, and beginning to truly, truly, truly love all parts of ourselves.
Ooh, I love that. Do you ever talk with people about the issue of, and we didn't discuss this beforehand, but it just popped into my head because I think a lot of people, the reason that they aren't speaking out is some type of shame.
Yeah.
And how do you counsel people on overcoming that shame, or somehow dissolving it?
Yeah. So I actually didn't have that experience myself, and so for me to speak into it is, it's not as authentic for me to say like, this is how you combat shame.
Yeah.
However, I will say my experience of it and the people that I've talked to, what it comes down to is more their own identity with their worth. So they feel shame or they feel guilt based upon a story they've created around, now I'm not worthy, or I'm not enough, or I'm unlovable, or I'm all of these things, right? I definitely have the worthiness conversation for sure. And then you notice in the patterns that you create around sexual abuse, specifically in my case, that you're choosing people based on that experience. So for example, I was choosing partners from that moment on. I began choosing partners that I would now in retrospect look at as weaker than me, so I could dominate the relationship in a way to keep my power, because I didn't want that taken from me again. And when I recognized that, I was like, holy shit, that gets to stop like now. But that was a lot of healing. That was 2.5 years of like being in it and recognizing every time I would go on a date or anything, I would go, oh my God, I'm doing it again, right? Yeah. And then instead of judging myself for being in that space, being like, kudos to you, you got work to do, girl, right? Yeah. And then doing the work. So, and it still comes up.
Of course.
Yeah.
We're all works in progress.
Yeah.
I bet people at this point are wondering, because I get this question a lot of times when I'll say something like, oh, then I identified this limiting belief, especially about relationships, and they'll say, how did you do it? Do you recall how that you one day woke up to the realization that, oh, I'm dating these guys that allow me to feel like I'm staying in my power?
Yeah, I was actually, are you familiar with Ascension Leadership Academy? No. Okay, so it's a leadership program. It's based here in San Diego. It's all over the place, but they're called different things. Anyways, I had gone through this leadership program, and one of the exercises that they were doing, this came up for me. Like, I don't even remember the exercise, only that this came up in my head, and I was like, holy shit, oh my God, I totally do this. And I had said to my coach, I was like, this is what I'm doing. And at the same time, admitting this out loud feels terrifying, because that makes me feel like I've almost done a disservice to these men that I've dated and been in relationship with, because what could have been better for them or whatever, right? And I don't regret any of it, but at the same time, I'm like, fuck, man, like, I can do better than that.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's that once you create the awareness, you can't go back, right? It's like anything.
Yeah.
So the awareness is now there, and now it's, who do I get to be? And what do I get to do to be able to step forward into a place where I feel empowered by this now, instead of feeling like the guilt that had all of a sudden come up for me in that process.
Yeah. When I have that guilty feeling, tell me if this resonates with you at all, I have to remind myself that I was working with a different set of tools when I was making those decisions, right?
Yeah.
You know, this is before I had done much of the work, as we say, you know, going through medical school, residency, fellowship, there was no time to do work on myself. It was just work. And then when it was finally like, oh, you need to work on yourself, I can't shame myself or guilt myself for the decisions that that person made who was just trying to keep it together.
I love that so much. That's beautiful. Yeah, and that absolutely does resonate with me, right? Especially when you think about this happening in my experience at 19. Sure, I thought I knew everything, but let's be real, I knew nothing, and I still am very open to saying I know nothing, right?
Yes.
Like, we're all a work in progress.
Right. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So you get to this point down the road, you're like, whoa, wow, what I didn't know. They say, like, what would you tell your 16-year-old self? And it'd be like, you don't know anything. Don't convince yourself otherwise.
Totally.
Oh, I love that. So as I was talking to you before we started, that now I like guests to come on and they talk about their quits, and they can talk about anything that they think is helpful in other people going through that quit. So if somebody is listening to this and they either are in a position very similar to yours where they've been silent about a certain thing, or maybe they've just been silent about whatever their truth is, are there some ways that you would suggest they test out the waters of sharing their truth? Yeah.
I think one of the biggest ones for me that I've seen help a lot of people actually, and this is women specific, I think more so. So many women have a really hard time receiving, yet we want to. We want to be able to sit in that feminine seat. We want to be able to, you know, be adored and loved and cared for by our partner. And there's this whole stigma around being strong and independent, right? Like, I was raised that way, and it took all of these years, I'm 38 now, and it took all of these years to be able to say, yeah, that's cool to like be strong and independent. And I want the things too, and I want to be a woman, and I want to be okay to sit in that place and have a man, you know, be a man. And so for me, my biggest test in the quit phase was allowing myself to receive, because that was my actual truth and what felt good for me. So stretching into the place of something that felt really uncomfortable, and things as simple as going on a date and not pulling out your wallet. And I was like, oh God, this is so uncomfortable. I don't know what to do with this, right? But that was my actual truth, was to be able to receive that. And that practice over and over and over again was so helpful in every other area of my life and standing in my truth. So for a lot of people, that may be they're not speaking up at work, let's just say, and they need help and they're overwhelmed, but they think if they ask for help, it's going to make them appear weak. So they take everything on, and then by the time they get home, they're an absolute shit show. They feel terrible. They're not taking care of themselves. Their husband's like, I want attention. Their kids want attention, and they're like, I can't do all of this. Great. Now you get to ask for help.
Yes.
Right? Like, your truth is that you need help, and you get to have help.
Yes.
Right?
And it doesn't make you a less independent, strong person.
No. And that's the funny thing about labels, right? Is labels are perception. We create the label, and then whatever we perceive to be the truth about that label is now the definition of that label. Like, how does that work? That is so retarded. It's ridiculous. So in all of that, being able to say, this doesn't feel true to me. This doesn't feel good for me. Instead, I'm choosing this, and it feels really scary. But the reason that I'm going to step into it is because I know that when I do that, it's going to feel so much more aligned in my body. And ultimately that creates a balance throughout.
Yeah. You brought up something that reminds me of a story. So I came to the realization at some point in time I did need to ask for more help. And it was like, it hit me in kind of one of these funny ways. And I was telling somebody the story about it while we're at a pizza parlor. And is that a thing? Pizza parlor? We're at a pizza place in Little Italy, New York at this time. And I had like swallowed some red pepper flake and it had gone down the wrong way. So I continue to tell him the story about how I never asked for help. I look around, there's no water. I keep telling the story, I'm about to die. He's like, are you honestly not asking for water while you're telling me the story about how you never asked for what you need? I'm like, yes, that is exactly what's happening right now. Thanks for pointing that back out to me.
I love how the universe is always bringing it back, and the question always comes up like, how is this a reflection for your life?
Yeah.
Like, the red pepper is just a symbol of everything else.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, we're going to keep tickling you.
Yeah.
We're going to keep needing to ask for help. What's so funny about you're talking about perception is that if we see a person like Oprah, and we know she has like 5,000 assistants in every area, and we think she is the strongest woman, and yet the rest of us are like, oh, if we ask for help, we're not strong women. No, strong women have a team of helpers.
Yeah. They know to play to their strengths.
Exactly. We're not supposed to be great. She's the one who said you can have it all. You can't just have it all at the same time.
Yeah.
And do I want to have it all? Do I want to be great at my like administration stuff and the quitting stuff and the podcast editing? Like, not really. Like, there are parts of that I don't need to be great at all.
Yeah.
Have somebody else who loves organizing things do logistics. Fantastic. You know,
Yeah.
I think strong women are the ones that have a team. You know, because that means to me that they have managed things well enough and they know how to ask for help and find somebody that will complement their strengths.
Yeah.
And they're not trying to do this badge of courage. I'm doing it all.
Yeah.
Because that's going to crumble at some point.
Yeah. And you got to think like we're teaching future generations that. And I'm sorry, but that's not a skill, actually.
Right.
That's a detriment.
Yes.
So if we can teach them the importance of asking for what you need, asking for what you want, speaking your truth, as like I said this to you before we started, as long as it's coming from a good place, that's okay. It's okay to say.
Yeah.
And not everybody's going to get it. Not everybody's going to resonate with it. That is one thing, too, that I want to make sure that people understand is that when I started speaking publicly about this and eventually told my mom would see me post things on social media and she was like, honey, do you think that you really need to say that in public? And I was like, yes, I do. It took her years to actually accept and understand the reasoning behind it. And it was this January, my stepdad passed away and I went home and we were sitting at breakfast and my mom started crying. And rest in peace, Wayne, but he was one of those guys that he spoke over everybody, always. And so my mom, who's very fun and funny, had lost her voice in that process. And she was crying at brunch and she says, honey, I think I get it. And I said, what do you get? And she's like, I know why you're speaking up. She's like, I know you want to help people. I really get that now. She's like, I just want to let you know that because you've spoken up, you've given me permission to speak to. And I was like, that was enough. Like, that was all of it.
Oh,
everything.
That's amazing.
Right? So when we do that, we give other people permission to do the same. And it can be people that you don't even know are paying attention. And the people that, you know, the haters, as we'll call them, right? Like, those are going to happen always.
Yeah.
Those aren't your people. So keep trucking along. You're fine. You do you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that. They don't get to be in my 5.
No.
That's it. That's all there is to it.
Yep. 100%.
And, yeah, I love the full circleness of you tell your mom, so you get this, you know, then you're in your full truth. But your mom starts to judge a little bit. But then she realizes that what you're doing, instead of being worthy of judgment, actually sets her free. That's incredible. I love that so much.
Yeah.
Wow. And you're absolutely right. For everybody out there who, you know, I've told this many times before, but if I'm about to share something on Facebook, and Josh Trent and I had this conversation on his show, like the difference between honestly sharing your truth and being like, okay guys, I'm gonna get really vulnerable right now, and I'm gonna have this vulnerability hangover, and this like manufactured vulnerability, but like you know, once every few months, I'll go through a little phase of something that was quasi-difficult, or share a little, maybe more than I think I should. Every time that's what people resonate with, and they'll say like, oh man, I had the exact same thing happen, and you're absolutely right that you don't know who's watching. This morning I got a message from somebody who's like, you posted a podcast episode, not even on my own podcast, I was on Mind Body Musings, talking about student debt. And I had not opened up about my extreme student debt on a podcast before. And he was like, man, I love that episode. It spoke to me right at the right time. I'm totally like trying to decide whether or not to invest in this thing and making peace with that debt. I was like, wow, you really don't know who is listening.
No.
So just keep sharing.
Yeah. Yeah, be you, show up.
Show
Like the biggest gift you can give to this world is to show up authentically as you are. It is so beautiful. Like I can't even say. And it's so interesting to me because I don't know if you've had this experience. I know I have, and so many people have. You've been in a relationship and you find yourself forgetting pieces of yourself and adapting to something that you're now settling for because you love this person. And then you think, what would happen if I was 100% me? What could manifest in my life? Like, what could this relationship actually be? What could this job actually be, right? Like, that's all a creation of our own limitation.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have that fear when you're in that relationship, like if I show them my real self, will they still love me? Yeah. Well, if they don't love you now.
No, exactly. They are not your people.
They're not your people.
Peace out, motherfucker.
I always feel that because I'm trying to, like you said, tapping into the feminine. And when I go on the very few days I do probably go on, but I'm like, okay, am I doing this feminine thing or this masculine thing? I'm like, this shouldn't be that hard.
Yeah.
If I'm just me, there's going to be somebody out there that appreciates me and my possibly less feminine than your average humor. I don't, whatever it is, you know. I'm still like working on, like you said, the receiving and that kind of part. That I can handle. But if I have to do certain things to be super feminine, I'm like, maybe there's just not my person.
Yeah. Of course, and there's so many different, I don't know if they're love coaches or what they are, but like Alison Armstrong, and then there's another author who I can't think of her name, but she wrote the book, Getting to I Do.
Oh yes, oh yes.
You know
Dr. Pat.
Okay, so she writes a lot about like the masculine, feminine. For me, it's a little much, and I think there's always something to take away, right? But it's decide when you get into a relationship, are you going to be masculine or feminine? Like, choose your role.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's flippy floppy, like at times.
Exactly. Yeah. I had this conversation, and again, I love anytime that I get to say this. I had this conversation with Jay Shetty. It's like the only one sentence we've ever exchanged in our lives, but he gave this talk, and the thing that really resonated with me, so I brought it up to him when we were after the talk, is I was like, I love that you said in your talk that different people in a relationship take the lead in different areas. So his wife, and Jay Shetty, who's a monk, his wife was the leader in meditation initially.
Oh wow!
It's something you wouldn't even think.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So, and if you're correlating the leader with the masculine energy, well then she was the masculine force in the meditation realm.
Yeah.
And I love that. Like you said, it doesn't have to be just you pick one role and go with it.
Yeah.
I mean, there has to be both. I mean, I'm sure there are some examples where it works that somebody's constantly in their masculine, constantly feminine. But I think most, like you said, people who do fall into the strong, independent woman syndrome are going to have a lot to give, and you don't want to just sit there and receive all the time and never be giving. That doesn't feel good either.
It feels terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're like, let me contribute.
Absolutely. Yes.
Oh my God. As I predicted, we could talk for 20 hours and you will be my best friend.
I love it.
So good.
So good.
Please tell people where they can find you.
Probably Instagram. So it's Sheree Trask, SHEREETRASK. And I have a podcast, Soul Fucked. There's no you in fucked. I know.
I was like, is there no you in soul? Oh no, you.
No, there's no you in fucked. That sounds terrible, but it's being revamped right now. So I think that I only have 13 episodes up. I just took 25 down, but that is live on iTunes. And yeah, that's me.
I love you.
And I love you back.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
this is such an important message. And it's just a great example of how almost anything can, people are like, oh, do you just talk about quitting jobs and relationships? I'm like, you can flip anything into a quit. And when I was talking to you initially, I'm like, what are you talking about? What, like in the quit realm, you're like, quitting silencing, quit not sharing my truth. I'm like, that's an amazing quit. Some people would say like, oh, just start speaking up. No. Quit the silence.
Quit the silence.
It's gone, you know? Like sometimes it's easier to think that you're just taking something away than like make another addition. Okay, I've got to start doing a thing. No, you always had a voice. There was just something holding it back. Just quit that.
Yeah, and usually it's us, right?
Exactly. Oh my God. There's how you wrap up the episode. Usually it's us. My dear, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
All right, for everybody else out there, until next time, happy quitting. Bye, Facebook.
Bye.